thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Shilpa, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to share this topic. It's one that I'm super passionate about. I think we share that in common, that we're both kind of committed and dedicated to helping people figure out their purpose
Absolutely.
in life. Yeah.
Yeah, just before we hit record, I was sharing with you that I've always naturally enjoyed doing this. And it sounds like you've been on this path for almost your entire career.
Well, almost. I actually spent the first part of my career in advertising. And so I had that experience of something that I was good at, but not feeling fulfilled. And ironically, then that became my purpose, is to help people figure out, what are your natural gifts and talents and how can you find fulfillment and meaning at work? And it was sort of a happenstance way that I ended up making my career transition. But boy, man, once you get into that place where you really truly meant to be, it just makes such a difference in every aspect of your life, and work just feels really different.
Yes, I can imagine that imagining what your life could be like is a little bit hard unless somebody, on the other hand, has gone through the pain and then recognizing the pleasure of being fulfilled. Now, the name of your company, Imagine Coaching, that's perfect.
Yes. Yeah. It was just like, because I really resonate with Glennon Doyle has a really beautiful quote out there, and she talks about how rather than going to going to what's out there to look for what's next in our lives, that to go to our imagination. What can we imagine our best lives to look like? What is the potential that's sort of brewing inside of us? And imagination is really that gateway that helps inform us and gives us guidance on what's possible in our lives. And I think sometimes we can cut ourselves short by just, thinking about that practical part. And so imagination is really powerful, especially when making changes in transition.
And I also find that very spiritual in nature, because to imagine is often when you sit in meditation, you imagine the state or the feeling or the condition
Yes.
as you make that transition, and then it becomes a reality.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think what you're pointing at is a lot of times this stuff is in us. I'm going to just these next steps of where we should be going are in us. And um and by getting quiet, by listening to that inner guidance, we can get some clarity and begin to trust, because all of us are born with unique things to offer to the world, and rather than having the outside dictate in, we can start to be led and guided in a very spiritual way.
Another facet of what I often focus on is mindset. And sounds like you've also incorporated that. Perhaps for those who don't know or are aware of, can you share a little bit about your involvement with and founding of Daring Venture?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So just as you mentioned, I have Imagine Coaching, which I've had for about 25 years. And then about 9 years ago, I co-founded another organization called the Daring Venture with Jenny Peterson, and we've since added a third partner, Holly O'Hanlon. And that business is really all about courage, and it's based on the research of Brene Brown, and we also integrate other positive psychology. But it's really about building these courage building skills about how do you really want to live your life, because being brave requires vulnerability. And so they are two sides of the same coin. And so when we want to start to be doing something different with our lives, whether it's switching careers or asking for a promotion or dreaming bigger about what's possible, it does really require that courage. So that's the foundation. Of the Daring Venture. We do a program called Dare to Lead, which is a 20-hour courage building program based on the research of Dr. Brene Brown. And then we also integrate positive psychology and executive coaching so that people can really make changes. But it does start with this idea of, it's not easy to really go for your dreams. It's not really easy to take those non-traditional paths. And it's vulnerable because we don't always know how it's going to work out. And yet that's where the juice is, that's where the fulfillment is, and that's where we can really show up as our best selves in the world and make an impact and really make a difference.
And I can truly resonate with this concept of vulnerability. There are innumerable instances through the day as I engage with my potential clients or even a podcast guest where at times you are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's tough because it's a business, but by the same token, it's your heart. And
Yes.
so it affects you on a different level as opposed to if you were, say, working for some corporation and you can stay somewhat detached.
Right. Yeah. I think what you're saying is so powerful because it's easier to be put yourself out there when you don't have your own heart or skin in the game. But when you're making, when it's your business, when it's your career, when you're personally connected to the results, it feels really different. It feels, much more vulnerable and much more courageous. And I think one of the things when we at the Daring Venture or part of Brené's work that we talk about is that every single act of courage, anything, whether it's speaking up in a meeting or starting a business or, defending our country is a vulnerable act. It is, preceded by like, this does not feel good. This does not feel comfortable. This feels scary. I don't know how this is going to turn out. And so that is just the more that we can kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable, knowing that is part of the process. I think that really can change what we're willing to do and how we're willing to show up with each other.
And when you say showing up with each other, what I have found that even when I am putting the lens on myself saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe, and then you fill in the blanks, you did this or you fumbled or whatever it is, then I allow more grace now with others because I recognize that they too are on their journey. And whether they're aware or not, their vulnerability is part of their evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's been a big piece of the work is just to really have compassion. We know that in those moments where you put yourself out there, it is possible that you can have that feeling of less than show up. I'm not enough in this situation. I'm, who do I think I am to do this? And the antidote to that is really, self-compassion and then also empathy from others. And so we know that if we want to kind of raise the level of everybody being able to contribute, that compassion and empathy for ourselves and others is really essential. Building that culture of support, building up others, helping them, to not take those mistakes too seriously, and give themselves grace.
Give themselves grace, absolutely. And that feeling of not being enough, does that ever go away?
I don't think so, Shilpa. I don't think so. I think it's, I think we get better at being resilient to it, but I also think it's an intentional practice, right? Of practicing compassion, practicing grace, practicing, I'm going to get up and just try again, and getting comfortable with like the fact that it might not always work out.
No.
Yeah.
Even during my podcast, when I invite certain guests, I find myself going, am I enough to even ask them to be on my show?
I think that's such a normal, and thank you for saying that, because I think that just normalizes, because what you're doing is really brave. You're putting yourself out there. It's that whole idea of, I don't have any guarantee of how this is going to go. I'm just going to show up and ask questions and see what happens, and that is really brave. And that is also vulnerability. And, anytime, if we stay safe, if we stay under the radar and we just kind of stay in that little box of your life, you're probably going to experience a lot less of that feeling of less than, because you're not stretching yourself. And
Oh,
so
I just got goosebumps when you said that.
yeah. So you're when you're in a place where you're actually pursuing your dreams, you're going for what really feels good to you, it's going to require some risk probably. And that it's also going to require those feelings of maybe inadequacy, imposter syndrome, am I enough in this? And so I think that's like just a great awareness for people to go, okay, this is just part of the process. I'm going to give myself grace in this. I'm doing something really brave, and I'm not just staying under the radar. I'm not just staying in the box. I'm doing something that is meaningful.
Yeah, just the other day there was an incident and I had that self-talk where I was like, part of me was like, well, maybe if you just could learn how to stay under the radar. But those weren't
Oh,
my words, but I was like, I
yeah.
would not have been put in this situation. And it was my self-induced situation,
Yeah.
but it was because I had to be brave and make a conversation with someone regarding the business and
Yeah.
invite some guest. It just didn't turn out. And
Yeah.
I found myself going, if I just stayed under the radar, it would have been.
Mm,
But that going back to that same concept of am I enough? Another
yeah.
concept of that came up when I was going through my meditation training and certification was something my coach at the time would talk about. And I thought, oh, I won't go through that, which is imposter syndrome. But
Yeah.
now that I'm there, I am
Yeah.
putting myself into course writing, workshops, and
Yeah.
talking with people that I've never met face to face. That
Mhm.
imposter syndrome comes up, and
Yeah.
I would love for you to share a little bit about that because I know those who are pursuing their passion, they may
Mhm.
be experiencing it, not even knowing that that
Right.
is what imposter
Yeah.
syndrome is.
Yeah. Well, and I think when everything that we're talking about, that imposter syndrome, feeling not enough, who do I think I am in this situation? That emotion that underpins all of that is shame. That based on the research from Dr. Brene Brown, is that it is, and it's a visceral feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I thinking? What am I doing? And one of the things to just be aware of is too, how do we handle, when that shows up, how do we handle it? And she talks about the three ways. One is that we move toward, and we hustle and we people please and we, work harder and we try harder. And, we might not set great boundaries for ourselves. And that's my go-to. And the second is we self-protect and we become like the smartest person in the room. We maybe kind of step back, don't engage, distance ourselves. And then the third is sort of that I'm gonna, micromanage. I'm gonna maybe be a little bit aggressive. I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna, that pushing kind of maybe a little bit of sarcasm. So people handle it differently. We all do, as human beings, we all do all three of those. And so noticing like when that feeling is coming up, oftentimes people tend to like really start hustling for their worth. It is especially common for women. And so noticing like, am I doing this? What is my motivation underneath this? Am I hustling right now? Am I pleasing and appeasing? Or am I really standing in my power of not shrinking? Am I staying firm in who I am, my sacred size? I know one of the things when I first started doing this work is I had a mantra is just be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. And it's like, if it doesn't work, then it's okay. Just be yourself. And so, just kind of going back to like, just show up as you, just show up as, um, who you are. And if it's a little messy, that's okay. But I guess those are the three that we know from the research that tend to be the go-to home bases for people. And we usually tend to people please and appease people who have more power or that we're trying to impress. And then, come out swinging with the people that we love the most.
So these are the natural states, and I just love Dr. Brene Brown's work because truly resonate with so many of the nuances in this particular concept that we, as human beings, have these natural psychological or mental mindset patterns, if you will. So
Yes.
we rely on these three maybe unconscious approaches.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
that, like what I often focus on for my training is bringing awareness, bringing
Yeah.
consciousness to our actions. In
Yes.
this instance, if our tendency is to go through those three, it can meditation or can the right mindset help you break those patterns?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So when you're in that thick of it, it is a physiological probably response in your body. And so having that mindfulness practice, having the breath, taking the pause, and just that idea, like I think you just said, of that awareness, like, okay, now I'm aware of this. Oh, wow, this is what I'm doing in this moment. And maybe even being lighthearted about it, to say, oh my gosh, here I am again. And then, I think one of the most powerful things about mindfulness is it really just kind of helps us calm the water every day. And so that we're walking into the day with that calm, not that, you know, turbulent undercurrent. And so that we can just show up and then notice things when things are moving too fast. That's oftentimes when we get more hooked into those patterns. And so when we can slow everything down, we're less likely to get hooked into those patterns because we can notice things and be aware.
Absolutely. And think of it as this is perhaps not necessarily the best analogy, but there's a boat on a water and it may have the momentum of going in a certain direction. Maybe it's going towards a waterfall, it's going down. And
Yeah.
if you are not meditating, if you're not stepping back once in a while, it can be part of this momentum where you don't realize I'm not slowed down in days and I'm going down a river now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's a
But
great analogy.
right, but
Yeah.
you feel like the undercurrent is taking you and you're not even aware.
Right. Right. I think that's the thing. We just had this conversation yesterday and we talked about how, when you have emotions and you're offloading, one of the emotions that, or one of the ways that people offload hurt is numbing. And somebody said, can you numb all the feelings that you're feeling about being frustrated at work with working more? And it was like, yes. And it's like, yeah, because you're now just in this current, right? And you're just letting that take you versus slowing down and going, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Am I not setting boundaries? What's my motivation behind all of this? How can I do this differently? So, to your point, where you're not just being swept away, you're like being intentional.
And the only thing one can control is truly themselves in the different situations. So what I have learned is that whether those three conditions or patterns that you've described are coming from your own behavior,
Yeah.
conscious or unconscious, or it's coming from someone else, rather than getting swept away if it's coming from someone else,
Yeah.
perhaps that's where, not even perhaps, that is where the meditation mindset, consciously, intentionally, and daily doing it helps.
Right.
Because you may sit back, and I do this sometimes. If, like I mentioned, there was this awkward incident, and next thing I found myself is doing number one, which you described is, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to work 10 times harder. I'm
Yeah.
going to fill in the blanks so that when they are engaging with me, I'm worthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's a vulnerable share. And I think that is so, so common. Like that's what, that's my go-to too, is a please and appease and hustle a little bit more. And I think it's especially common for women. And so it's just that catching yourself, and then you can, in it without awareness, then you can't do it differently. You just keep going. So I think that's a really powerful piece. And I think it kind of ties back to, if we want to be living our purpose, if we want to be taking those risks to maybe do things different, to show up with our natural gifts and talents and to really make a difference in the world, um, you know, to your point, you're stretching yourself right now. You're stretching yourself, which requires stepping out in new directions. And so you are going to probably feel that occasionally. And so it's also like being able to say, okay, this is just part of the process. I'm going to feel this way. And I can just, have some techniques and some tools, meditation, breath work, self-talk, compassion, maybe talking to a friend, of go-to strategies so that I can just reset and come back to my, my calm place.
Yes, even the mantra you mentioned, that just be yourself.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
it's simple. I remember hearing that ever since I was in my early teens, It
Yeah.
may not always make sense until you think about you're the only person you can control.
Yep.
You can choose to remain grounded. And so what
Yeah.
you've described is helpful for that. The other aspect of passion in what is in the purpose part.
Yeah.
I'd like for us to kind of explore that just for a moment, because I hear some common phrases that, well, we all have a purpose, or there's not just one purpose. I
Yeah.
I think this, when we say passion purpose, it means something a little more, I would say, spiritual. It's a big picture thinking.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, each of us are here. We're created, we're born with, certain gifts and talents, and one of the things that we talk about in the career world is that, you have indicator lights of where your gifts and talents are. It's where you're going to experience flow, when you're going to feel the best about yourself, when, things are going to come, they're still going to feel, it's still going to feel like work, but it's going to come so much easier. And you'll have that kind of that internal kind of signal light. One of the signal lights is that time passes really quickly. Another signal light is that you don't feel self-conscious about yourself while you're doing it. Another signal light is that, you feel that sense of accomplishment, because you can feel a sense of accomplishment with something, but you don't feel good about while you're doing it. And so kind of paying attention to those inner signals of like, is this my flow? Is this my natural gifts and talents? And then, I think that purpose piece can change and ebb and flow over time. But I feel like, people can find meaningful work in terms of like doing something really creative, or making a difference and helping people, or, building something, building a company. So I think that can ebb and flow, but what we do know is, like you talked about, going in and kind of getting that clarity from within of what is going to feel meaningful and purposeful, and that inner guidance is really important and powerful when making decisions about how do I want to use my gifts and talents in the world. And then we also know that if you combine, those flow skills plus meaning and purpose, whatever that means for you, that the research is that that's where you will achieve the highest levels of, in terms of success, or your best work, however you measure success or best work, they'll achieve at the highest levels. And then also in terms of a human being, that's where you self-actualize the most, because you're combining what you're naturally meant to do with something that's bigger than yourself. And so it's just a really powerful motivation, because there's nothing that feels better at work than to do those two things together.
Yeah.
And you're making an impact in the world somehow, some way. And you think, if everyone on this planet was doing that, just what a different world it would be. It would be a completely different world. We would all be, and it's not even just about work. It's like that your emotions would be different. How you interact with people would be different. Just, there's so many pieces to it. I think, like, if we could just name one thing that could really impact the world, that would be one thing.
And the word harmony comes to mind when you said that, because I can imagine that if we are all vibrating, again, this goes back to the spirituality
Yeah.
angle, right? But
Yeah.
as I mentioned, topic of passion and purpose is under the umbrella of energy awareness. And I did that conscientiously, knowing that we're energetic beings. If
Yeah.
we're vibrating on a level where we are feeling like self-actualized, we're connecting to our higher self, we're working from our authentic voice, then imagine it's not just about the work part, the professional work part. It could be
Yeah.
all aspects of how we arrive. It could be like on
Mm.
a Sunday, me volunteering somewhere, or
Yes.
perhaps helping a girlfriend work through something. It's
Right.
that's all work, right?
Right. Yep. I love that. Yeah. That it doesn't have to be going to work. It can be, this is my work. And that can be a personal mission. Like, this is what I want to be doing in my life right now. This is the impact I want to be making. And
Yeah,
then that touches every realm of your life, whether it's volunteer or your family or your friends. And it really becomes just integrated into who you are as a person.
right. And doesn't it feel that at that point the passion purpose almost become like one?
Yeah. 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 Like, this is just who I am. It's not about what I do, it's who I am.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think it also just ties to like you said, that spiritual piece of, we're all here to do something. We are created to do something. And our time here is, whatever you believe, short. And so to be able to leave a legacy and to leave the world a better place as a result of your presence here on earth, I think is pretty powerful.
absolutely. One of my favorite mantras in the last few months has been, I am a creator. And I do a lot of
Mm,
journaling around just that notion of I'm a creator. When you really reflect on it, you realize that that holds true for various aspects of life. In fact, everything. I could be in the
yeah.
kitchen cooking a nice meal and I'm a creator.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you could be in the garden, or you could be, brainstorming ideas you're creating right now. You're playing off of the things that I'm saying, and then you're saying something else that's creative.
Yeah.
It's not scripted. It's in the moment creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's really and that we're all capable of creating something new in our lives, so that we don't have to stay stuck.
No. And that's one of the things, one of the pain points that I often sense. I've gone through it, I've sensed it in other women, is that the feeling of being stuck
Yeah.
is one of the major pain points, or unfulfilled or overwhelmed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the stuckness, it can truly affect you on a physiological level.
Hmm.
It starts showing up on our in our tissues and in our body.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And energetically, like you've talked about, your
Yeah,
energy level isn't as good, your mood isn't as good, you're wrestling. There's a lot of mental gymnastics that might be going on when you're stuck.
yeah,
And it is interesting that oftentimes there's some kind of, there's like that Bridges has this model of transition, and oftentimes people are in that plateau. They're kind of stuck, and there's some comfort there, and you don't want to give up that comfort and that security, and I know what to expect. But then usually there's some kind of event that happens, and it can be either an external or an internal event, and sometimes it has nothing to do with, could just be the last straw, or a comment somebody makes, or it could be a birthday, it could be a kid graduates from whatever grade. And and when people get into that next phase, it's super messy and creative, but anything becomes possible. Like, things they would never have imagined when they were in that plateau become possible. Like, and it's kind of a cool, chaotic in some ways place of life, but then what can emerge from that is like a brand new life, a brand new kind of cycle of who I'm supposed to be as a person, and kind of moving up to that next rung, in terms of like that spiral. So I'm not just staying stuck anymore, and I'm not just going to keep going around the same spiral. I'm going to actually evolve.
yeah. The word evolve is spot on what I was thinking. The way you just articulated that entire process, and allowing again the grace, or whether it's yourself or others.
Yeah.
Recently saw something on Facebook. If a lot of my friends are in the same space, and one
Yeah.
he just made some comment like, I feel like I'm making a state of evolution. I'm shifting, and I've
Mhm.
seen that about myself. And another meditation friend chimed in. She said, I am as well. I'm like, oh, we
Mm.
go through. I maybe there is rhythms, and when we're stuck, we feel so much shame. I can say it for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think we can't be evolving all the time. So I mean, I think when you're stuck, you're still trying things.
Yeah.
You're still like working through things. I don't think, when people are stuck, they're still doing things to try to get unstuck.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and sometimes it's a slow process and sometimes it's a big, like, okay, the floodgate just opened. But I think there's that precipice of, am I going to make, here's one of the quotes from Brene that I think is super powerful. The cave I fear to enter holds the treasure that I seek. And I think when people are stuck, they know that cave, like, do not make me go there. I know that would help me. I know that would get me there, but that just feels too darn scary. That feels too risky. Like that if you can name that cave, then that's starting to get you unstuck. Like you can go, okay, I know that cave. I don't want to go there, but I will. Like then if you can start to think about, if I can go to that cave and that's going to give me the treasure. But there's a risk factor there. There's a leap of faith that has to happen, and kind of a trust factor and that's, I think, where the spirituality comes in, is like, I have to let go and know that maybe God is in charge here, and I can't do this by myself.
Allowing that surrender and reminding ourselves that we don't have to be doing it all. I just heard that just yesterday, that
Yeah.
in fact, if we really are humble about it, we're not doing a lot.
We're not doing any of it. We're doing the footwork and that's about it.
Yeah. And just to be,
Yeah.
again, step back, allow
Yeah.
grace.
Yeah.
But this is something that I feel like is your gift, Molly. And there is an entire generation of women now that'll be benefiting from this. I can
Mhm.
speak for myself that it's been a painful, long journey.
Yeah.
I'm here, and I had to
Yeah.
come to this place of, oh, I personally want to be a coach. I want to help others,
Yeah.
and I know I have this gift, but unlike where you and I potentially might be recognizing that in others, helping them lift up, I didn't always have anybody there.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a difference when you're not, because we know when you're supported, everything just feels easier. Even if it's not easier, it feels easier.
Yeah.
And so you have more energy and you have more, confidence to move forward. And when you have that social support.
And what excites me is that as a mother, and I'm an older mother, I work with my husband a lot to do the right things for our son. He's 10, and
Yeah.
things that we feel like we may not have had, like a mentor. So we
Nice.
try to surround him with mentorships and friendships where others are there to uplift him. And also
Nice.
just exposing him to so many things so that he's multidimensional. Because that's one of the things I believe a lot of us can relate to, is you're not something that needs to be put in a box with a label.
Right. Right. I completely agree. That's so cool that you're doing that for your son.
Yeah.
You're shaping him. I mean, and that kind of goes to your earlier comment, is you're not just doing this as your business, you're doing this as who you are. I'm shaping him, exposing him, I'm helping him grow as a person, I'm coaching him, and so that's beautiful. That's awesome. Like, there should be some kind of a program around that. How do
There,
you?
there should. Well, and what I was thinking was just for yourself, because you've been in this space for so long, and you mentioned daring venture, at least a 9-year, 10-year journey in that space, your
Yes.
life work, whether it's personal or professional, is all kind of one space in some regards, but in a
Yeah.
good way.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear people say there's no they have to cut off their professional from personal. But I feel comfortable saying that now I don't need to do that because I'm enjoying both.
Right. Yeah. Well, it does, and it doesn't feel like work. It feels good. It just feels like this is what I want to do in the world. Yeah. So it does make a difference. Um, and it's kind of goes to that essence of this is who I am and this is what fills me up. And so why would I not just do more of it?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, this is
this has
lovely.
been
It's
fun. Now, to wrap up, for those who are perhaps two age groups. One is, I would say, they're somewhere between their late 20s to late 30s,
yep.
and those who are maybe late 30s to beyond. And perhaps they might be doing what I've called my second act.
Mhm.
What kind of advice would you give for those two segments?
Yeah. So, I think the idea of, first of all, really figuring out where do I feel the best about myself? What are those natural gifts and talents? And then honoring that, because I know when I was, in the early part of my career, I knew that it wasn't a good fit, but I didn't honor it right away. And so I think honoring, putting that ahead of like the security or making money or what you should be doing, I think that's a big piece that holds people back. And so taking those risks earlier on, I think, is in some ways easier because you don't have maybe a family or a mortgage and all of that. So I would say for those younger people, take those risks earlier to figure out where your natural gifts and talents are. And it's just never too late to take those leaps of faith, even no matter what age you are, because um, it feels really scary and it feels really uncertain. But on the other side of it, it's just so rewarding and so much a better way to live your life. And trusting that it will work out, that you will be supported and that you will find a place to land that meets your gifts and talents and allows you to use your purpose in the world.
And does require a leap of faith and overcoming what might be fear. It could be fear of cultural judgment. It could be fear of, like, I came from a very orthodox Indian family where what was expected of me and what I wanted to do was going against the grain.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's a big piece is, am I doing this because this is expected of me? And this is what my, family, this is just sort of like what you're supposed to do. And so, I think to your point, that meditation can be really powerful in prayer, whatever that is for you, of going in and really listening to what's inside of you and what, where you're being led and guided to do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Molly, if someone would like to work with you, I will place the details in the show notes, but would you like to share anything about that as well?
Yeah. So if people are interested in that career purpose piece, my website is imaginecoaching.com, and I have a free it's a little workbook that you can get to kind of get started too. So that's available. And I also do chemistry check sessions. So people can sign up for that. Just get on the website and we meet for 30 minutes. You kind of share your story. I can share how I work with you, and that's a great way to see if coaching is right for you. And through the Daring Venture, we have a program called Dare to Lead. We have cohorts that run. We have one that's actually starting next week, but then we also have one starting in the fall. So that's a 10-week virtual program that's super powerful. Does really a lot of this leadership from the inside out concepts from Brene Brown that are truly transformative. So those would be my two calls to action.
That is awesome. And I would love to have you back in the future. I'm sure there's a topic where we can go deeper.
Yeah. Thank you, Shilpa. This was lovely. And it was so lovely to hear your story too, and for you to share some bits and pieces that were pretty courageous about the things that you've had to overcome and to get to where you are and continue to do that.
I really appreciate all of this. Thank you so much.